Welcome back to Taking Up Space with Jordan, the podcast where celebrating yourself isn't just encouraged, it's the standard. This month, I'm centering my focus on my new mantra, being authentically me, because somewhere along the way, I realized that I really needed to reconnect with the joy and love for my own life, without comparison, without apology. A few episodes ago, I had opened up about getting stuck in the comparison trap. I kept measuring my life against others, wondering why I couldn't replicate their success. And then it hit me, because it was never mine to replicate. Their path, their wins, their timeline, it all belonged to those people. And while I could learn from their journey, I wasn't meant to follow in their exact footsteps. I had to start living life on my own terms for myself and for no one else. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been around for a while, you know that the past year has been one of deep transformation for me. My divorce, my healing, and all the lessons that were in between have led me to one superb, undeniable truth. You can't build a life you love without believing in your own worth first. Not the kind of worth that's measured by achievements or external approval, but the kind that comes from within, unshakable, undeniable, and yours alone. And yet, so many of us are taught to seek validation outside of ourselves. Society, culture, even our own inner critic can make us feel like we have to prove our worth, fit in just enough to belong, but stand out just enough to be chosen. It's exhausting. And it's also why so many of us resonated with the Barbie quote. And I don't need to go into it because you know what the Barbie quote is, or the monologue. But it's time to start breaking free from that cycle. So today, we're diving into the art of knowing and honoring your self-worth. But, drum roll please. Before we jump in, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Your support means the world to me, and it's the best way to help Taking Up Space grow. And if you want even more content from me because you're just so obsessed, head over to Instagram or TikTok. My handle is Taking Up Space with Jordan, all one word. All right, we're going to go ahead and get into it because your worth isn't up for debate and it's about damn time to claim it. Self-worth and self-esteem often get mixed up or used interchangeably, but self-worth comes from within. It is the internal belief that you are worthy of love, respect, and compassion, specifically without any conditions, without any exceptions. Psychologists define self-worth as an individual's evaluation of themselves as a valuable, capable human being, deserving of respect and consideration. With that definition, can't talk all of a sudden. With that definition in mind, I want you to take a moment and I want you to ask yourself, where am I on my self-worth journey? Do I truly believe in my own worth, or am I still looking for external validation to feel enough? Am I honoring who I am? Or am I shrinking myself to fit into spaces that don't truly value me? And while you're thinking about these things, I want you to be honest with yourself. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just awareness. Because in any journey, the first step to becoming the version of ourselves, living our dream life, is going to be awareness. We have to recognize where we're holding ourselves back so we can start to build ourselves up. For myself, because I like to practice transparency here, I believe I have high self-worth now, but that wasn't always the case. For a long time, I made myself smaller for others. I softened my voice, I dimmed my light, and I accepted the bare freaking minimum. Sometimes even less than that. Because I didn't believe on a very deep level that I didn't deserve more. In my previous relationship, I found myself constantly asking for more from my partner at the time. But I didn't know how to communicate it. I just knew that the treatment that I was getting was not the right kind of treatment. And my partner was never abusive, but they were neglectful. And what I found was that no matter how much I adjusted my behavior, how small or how big I made myself, the treatment that I received by this person never changed. It was still the same. It was still the right word here. It felt like sometimes I was just a fly that was bothering them and that they just needed to wave me away or just do or say the thing to get me to go away as soon as possible. And that's when I realized the only voice that needed to tell me I was enough was my own. Self-worth is tricky because it has to come from within. It has to be your voice, not the world's or somebody else's. The call has to come from inside the house. You have to be the one ringing the bell and yelling from the rooftops that you are worthy of love, respect, and compassion, and all of the good things that are in between that. So I want to go back to that first question. Where am I on my self-worth journey? If you're at the beginning, welcome. This is where it starts. If you're in the middle, take this as a reminder. And if you feel like you've truly stepped into your self-worth, check in with yourself. Because no matter where you are on your journey, it's important to recognize that there are going to be ways that we might still be giving away or undermining our worth without even realizing it. One of the ways that we can make sure that we are not undermining our worth or setting it aside for other people is by setting boundaries. This was one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in honoring my worth, in honoring my value, and honoring who I am as a person. And that is the importance of setting boundaries. Because let's be real, knowing your worth is one thing, but protecting it, this is a whole different skill. And boundaries are about recognizing what serves you and what drains you. They're a reflection of your self-respect, not an act of selfishness. And I cannot say this enough. Setting boundaries does not make you a cold-hearted person. Setting boundaries does not mean that you are against the rest of the world. Setting boundaries does not mean that you are not open to compassion and open to different people. Setting boundaries is an act of self-care, an act of self-compassion for yourself. And for me, setting boundaries meant no longer accepting half-hearted relationships, whether in friendships, work, or dating. It meant saying no when something didn't align with my values. And it means trusting myself enough to walk away from situations that made me feel small. And one of those ways actually happened this past week. I had to walk away from a friendship because they weren't respecting my boundaries. They weren't honoring no matter how many times I requested it. They were just not quite getting it. And I realized that it was not my job anymore to teach them to honor my boundaries. It was no longer my job to continue to tell them over and over again, because at a certain point, you do have to walk away from different relationships when they're just not seeming to get it. And sometimes when you walk away, that is the eye-opening moment for them. And I'm going to tell you this, people won't always like it when you set boundaries. Some might push back. Some might try to guilt you into breaking them. But the thing is, the people who truly, really deeply respect and love you, they're going to honor your boundaries. And the ones that don't, fun fact, they were never meant to stay. So if you're struggling with setting boundaries, I want you to ask yourself, what am I afraid of losing? Because chances are, if a relationship can't survive your self-respect, it was never truly serving you in the first place. And I want you to think about that for a second. At what point do you have to realize that your self-respect, your self-worth does not need to be set aside for somebody else's feelings or how they are feeling because of something that you said or something that you did that was honoring you? Do you really want to be in a relationship with that type of person, whether it's a friendship, a work relationship, or a romantic one? Think about it. And I kind of wanted to get a little bit into my own story about how I started reclaiming my own self-worth. And I started this when I made a promise to myself. I will never shrink myself for someone else again. After my marriage had ended and I was finally ready to start building my life on my own terms, I made a decision. No matter who a person was, whether they were a lover, a friend, a manager, whoever, I would not make myself smaller for their comfort. I would stand proudly and be who I was always meant to be. But embodying that truth didn't happen overnight. I have spent years shaping myself around someone else. I had learned how to take up less space, how to be easy for them, how to avoid being too much. So when that relationship had ended, I wasn't just grieving what I had lost. I was rediscovering who I even was. And that can be a very painful process when you are looking around and you do not recognize the person in the mirror anymore. You do not recognize the habits. You do not recognize the routines that that person is doing, because it almost seems like you were being body doubled because you don't recognize yourself anymore. And at first, it was incredibly uncomfortable. I questioned myself constantly. I second guessed my voice, my choices, even the things that used to bring me joy, because I was out searching for the original version of myself. But I realized that original version got me here in the first place. She was the one that didn't have self-worth. She was the one that didn't have any self-respect. And so for so long, my identity had been wrapped up in someone else. And suddenly I was now expected, for myself actually, but I was expected to build a new foundation, not just for the world to see, but for myself to also believe in. And that meant doing the work. And the work is the hardest part. I went to therapy and I confronted the patterns I had built around making myself small. I sat with my thoughts, journaling through years of self-doubt and conditioning that I wasn't enough. I started setting boundaries even when it felt scary and awkward. And most importantly, I began finding joy on my own terms without worrying if it was too much for someone else to handle. Because there were times in my old relationship where if I was singing too loud, that was annoying. If I was wanting to redecorate the home, that was being too much. If I wanted to play with the dogs, I needed to be quieter. If I wanted to watch a Disney movie, I needed to choose something else because I always watched Disney. It was always just, there was always something. There was always some reason why I couldn't have those little moments of joy because they were upsetting someone else. And that's why this last part, finding joy, is actually my theme for March, because reclaiming your self-worth isn't just about unlearning those harmful patterns. It's about choosing yourself over and over and over again. It's about standing firm in who you are, not just in resistance to the past, but in a celebration of yourself today and the future. So if you're in this place right now, if you're navigating the messy, beautiful process of rediscovering yourself, know that you're not alone. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes a whole damn lot of self-compassion. But every time you choose yourself, every time you stand a little taller, every time you get to embrace your joy without apology, you are reclaiming your worth. And no one can ever take that away from you again. Which brings us to our next phase, which is owning your worth and being seen. When we start to recognize our internal worth and own it, that doesn't mean all our problems disappear. Even with self-confidence, we all have moments of self-doubt. We're going to stumble. We're going to say the wrong thing. There's going to be things that feel off. But the difference is we no longer hold on to those feelings as long. We acknowledge them and then we move on. But what happens when our internal confidence doesn't seem to be reflected in how the world treats us? When we've done the work, but the external validation or lack of it challenges our belief in ourselves. One of the hardest parts of knowing your worth is resisting the urge to shrink it when the world doesn't reflect it back to you. Imagine this. You do all the work. You set the boundaries in your relationships. Maybe you lost a friend or two, but you gained deeper connections with others. You know what you want in a romantic partner and what you're willing to give. You've raised the bar for yourself and for those around you. You've created a version of yourself that is confident, strong, independent, kind, smart, and gentle. But no one seems to see that. Or worse, you feel like no one is honoring your worth. No one is recognizing what you have done. I recently joined the dating apps. Please join me in a moment of silence. Okay, now we can move on. I told myself I wasn't going to make it my whole life. I was just going to dip my toes in, seeing what was out there. As a heterosexual woman, I was disappointed. I wasn't seeing any people I even remotely wanted to have a conversation with. I saw profiles with things like, looking for a woman who knows her worth but is willing to be in the kitchen all day for me. Excuse me? What? What? I saw countless men posting nearly nude photos in fully public spaces with captions like what you see, and they're like grabbing certain parts of themselves. I was so frustrated and I continue to be, because these were the men the algorithm kept pushing my way. This is what an app assumed that I would match with. In a moment of doubt, I remember I texted my bestie, my best friend. I haven't talked about her in a little bit. But I asked her what was wrong with me, because surely I was the problem. Surely it was me. Was I setting my standards too high? Was I being the delusional one in thinking I was worthy of what I was wanting? Was this a fantasy? As women, and especially as Black women, we're often told our standards are too high, that we should just be grateful for whatever attention we get. But knowing your worth isn't arrogance, it's self-respect. Sometimes when self-doubt creeps in, though, hearing validation from someone who truly knows and sees you can be so grounding. And my best friend reminded me of something that I want to share with the rest of you because I think it can apply to all of us. You are a powerful, brilliant, thoughtful, and high-quality woman. The right person will be lucky to have you, and it will take a phenomenal man to earn that privilege. Dating apps and algorithms don't define your worth. And while having high standards might mean the search takes longer, settling is not an option because you are the prize. Most importantly, what I loved about this is she reminded me to have faith. Faith that good men exist, faith in timing, faith in myself. And no matter where I am in the dating journey, I am the ultimate love of my life, and a relationship is simply a bonus. Sometimes we need that outside perspective to help us see what we might temporarily forget about ourselves, and that's okay. There is always going to be some tension between internal confidence and external validation. And not all external validation is harmful. Seeking support from those who really know you, who really see the value, is different from looking for worth in places that diminish us. If you're struggling with friendships or romantic partnerships, know that it's okay to be alone. It's okay to feel lonely. But if we hold on to belief that we are worthy of love, that we will find people who celebrate and cherish us, then yes, it might take longer. But the life we get to live in the meantime, filled with confidence, self-love, and joy, is 1,000 times always going to be worth it. We get to move through life on our own terms, choosing joy, embracing self-compassion, and refusing to settle for anything less than what we deserve. I created a little framework for you guys for self-worth because I think it's really important to understand that self-worth, it comes with a few components, and you might be feeling strong in one area, but not in another. It's kind of like a 5-step process, but it touches on everything that we've talked about today. And you can do it honestly in any order that you want because life is not linear. And like I said, you might be strong in one area, but not in another. So let's walk through that just real quick. The first is recognizing your intrinsic value. Explain self-worth. I'm going to start over in 3, 2, 1. The first is recognizing your intrinsic value. Self-worth doesn't come from external validation, but from an understanding that we are worthy just by being ourselves. Step 2 is identifying our limiting beliefs. Identify and break down those negative beliefs about ourselves. I have a whole series on navigating limiting beliefs that I will share down below. But basically, think of limiting beliefs as the ideas and opinions that we hold about the world that keep us from stepping fully into our power and stepping into the people that we are meant to be and want to be. Limiting beliefs are things like, only good things happen to people like her. My little Midwest came out there. Or phrases such as, I will never be enough, or I'm not good enough, or I can't dress that way because my body looks like this. Just things that hold us back. Things that tell us, no, we need to do that. Limiting beliefs try to keep us in those boxes, and we want to live outside the boxes because that's where growth is going to occur, and limiting beliefs do not want us to grow. Our third area is practicing self-compassion, and this is a huge, huge part that I think a lot of people forget. They do all of the work, but then forget that they need to celebrate themselves. They need to give themselves kindness and give themselves grace. So how you can start practicing self-compassion is when you hear those limiting beliefs, when you start to doubt yourself, when you start to being a little bit mean, honestly, to yourself, I want you to look at yourself in the mirror and I want you to talk to that person as if they were a close friend that needed a little bit of kindness. Starting to have that conversation with yourself and give yourself kindness and give yourself grace, especially in moments of self-doubt, are a great way to start practicing self-compassion. Fourth one, which we've already discussed, is setting boundaries. We have to establish healthy boundaries because that will strengthen our self-worth. And the last one, we have to embrace the uncomfortability that is growth. Evolving and learning as part of evolving and learning is a part of the self-worth journey, and it's part of just creating your dream life. You have to allow yourself this space and the time and the energy to evolve into the person that you want to be. And that's going to be uncomfortable and it's not going to be quick. And if you want a PDF version of this or just a slide of this, I have it created, but you can just go ahead and slip into those DMs and let me know and I'll be happy to send it to you. So now we're going to shift our focus just a little. And we're going to be jumping ahead into the future where you are owning your worth. You are that bitch. You see it and you know that you are enough and you are more than enough because you are seeing your worth, and that's beautiful. One of the most freeing things we can do for ourselves is understand innately that we are worthy. And while we should hold that truth within us, it's also okay to seek reminders from people who love us every now and then. Sometimes we need a trusted friend to reflect back what we momentarily forget. We need them to remind us of our strength, of our brilliance, of our worth. The key is knowing that their affirmation is just that, a reminder, not a requirement. When we fully embrace our self-worth, it shifts everything. We stop over-explaining ourselves to people committed to misunderstanding us. We stop contorting into versions of ourselves that fit someone else's idea of us and comfort level. We stop chasing people. We stop chasing jobs. We stop chasing spaces that don't see our value. Instead, we stand firm, knowing that what is meant for us will recognize and honor us in return. This shift in focus doesn't mean we won't have moments of doubt. It doesn't mean rejection won't sting or loneliness won't creep in. But it does mean that those moments won't define us. They won't shake the foundation that we've built. When someone doesn't appreciate us, we recognize that as their limitation, not a reflection of our worth. So what can you do today to reinforce this truth for yourself? First, you can take a moment to reflect on how far you've come. Write down a few ways that you've honored your worth just in the past year. Think about the people in your life who truly see you. Reach out to one of them and just connect with them. Consider where you might still be seeking validation from sources that are starting to drain you or have been draining you, rather than uplifting you. What small shift can you make to reclaim that energy? If you're struggling right now, here's a reminder. You are already enough. You don't have to prove your worth to someone, especially if they refuse to see it. The right people, the right opportunities, and the right love will meet you where you are. No shrinking, no settling required. Keep choosing yourself over and over again. The more you do, the more your life will reflect the worth that you've always had. Because at the end of the day, stepping into your worth isn't about being perfect. It's about knowing deep in your bones that you don't have to shrink, settle, or prove yourself to be valuable. You already are. The world may not always mirror that back to you, but that doesn't mean it's not true. So keep going, keep holding your standards, especially keep holding those standards high, and keep honoring the version of you that refuses to accept less than she deserves. There will be moments of doubt, moments of frustration, but you are not wrong for wanting more. You are not asking for too much, and you sure as hell don't have to apologize for expecting respect and care. As you move through this week, I challenge you to do one thing. This is your homework. Reaffirm your worth. Whether it's through journaling, saying a daily affirmation, or simply just reminding yourself in the mirror, choose to believe in yourself a little harder today. And if you need a reminder, let this be it. You are not hard to love. You are not asking for too much. You are enough exactly as you are. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share it on Instagram, tag me, and let's keep this conversation going. And if you haven't already, because it's time to say it again, don't forget to follow the podcast so you don't miss what's coming next. And until next time, keep choosing yourself over and over again. Kisses.